And when I began to look at it to begin with, I couldn't get anywhere. But then, as I mentioned, I found out that there was this second mirror world of development in Nazi Germany, which was all around what the SS were doing. They had their own, if you like, industrial empire within a bigger industrial scene
Right.
in Germany. And in particular, there was an individual in charge of that top secret development in the SS at the end of the war, whose name was General Hans Kammler, who was a bureaucrat and had been tasked by Hitler with developing Germany's top secret weapon systems at the end of the war. I'd never heard of this guy, which was interesting considering I have sort of have an interest in Second World War history. And there was a reason for that, which is because Kammler had or has effectively been airbrushed from history. And he was airbrushed because there were, as I discovered in the hunt for Zero Point, multiple different references to his quotes death.
Right.
It transpired, I later found out, that he hadn't died at all, that he had, if you like, defected to give up his trade secrets for his survival, because
Right.
this was a man who was also intimately connected with the Holocaust.
When you say he was airbrushed, who was responsible for airbrushing him out of
Well, when I
textbooks?
when I was investigating the hunt for Zero Point, that was not clear.
Okay.
What you get with Kammler, what I got then, was a trail of clues that sort of went everywhere and nowhere. In that this guy had built up an enormous industrial empire in the heart of the greater German Reich towards the end of the war. A lot of it was underground, but incredibly sophisticated. It was surrounded by an enormously sophisticated counterintelligence operation to protect it from prying eyes and spying. And so these, at the end of the war, when the sort of the Kammler trail runs out, what you get are these multiple conflicting stories about his death. He shot himself. He was killed by American troops entering Prague. He, he hanged himself. I mean, there were different, 5 or 6 different accounts, which to me, of course, suggested suspicion. I mean, it was instant suspicion that these multiple varying accounts of his death had to be covering something up. But I did not know who was doing the covering up then. I do now. And at the time, it was unclear whether, for example, if he had defected, he had gone to the Americans or to the Russians, or maybe even to the Brits. But it seemed that the Russians and the Americans were sort of in there as equal sort of places where he might have gone.
Right. You said you do know now, so who's responsible?
Okay, so plot spoiler. If you want to read The Hunt for Zero Point, I am about to reveal what happened to
Okay.
Hans Kammler.
Okay.
So after I finished The Hunt for Zero Point, it came out in 2001 in the UK and 2002 in the US. I sort of left it alone for a bit, and then I was contacted by a guy called Keith Chester, who was an archive digger. He went into archives looking for stuff. He had become intrigued by the Kammler story and The Hunt for Zero Point, so he said, "Why don't we work together? You put together what you know, I'll go do the archive digging. Let's see if we can find Hans Kammler." And I went, "Great, let's do that." So we teamed up with a couple of other guys, a chap called Dr. Colm Lowry, who knew a lot about German secret weapons, and Hans Kammler as well. And eventually, we put a lot together. Keith actually found several smoking gun pieces of archival evidence in the National Archives in America, demonstrating that Kammler had handed himself over to the Americans under a deal. Incredibly hard to find. This was 15 years ago. But, he
Right.
found them.
Was this information not previously available to you when you wrote the book, or was it just
No,
okay, like a
definitely
recently
not at all.
declassified?
I mean, it was, and lots of people had been looking for him, and began to more and more in the sort of years after The Hunt for Zero Point was published, because Kammler's story was remarkably ill known before The Hunt for Zero Point came out. He had been documented in a book that I cite in The Hunt for Zero Point, which is called Blunder, and it's by a wartime journalist called Tom Agustin. And I managed to speak to Tom Agustin before he died, and Agustin had done fantastic work in tracking down Kammler as far as things went when he wrote the book, which I think was maybe around late 1970s, 1980. But Agustin couldn't find Kammler. I couldn't find Kammler in the hunt, and so that's why we went looking for him afterwards. Now, I walked away from the project that I was involved in with Keith and Colm, because I had various other things going on. They continued it, and their work is documented in a book called The Hidden Nazi, and it's a great read. It's also they partnered up with another writer called Dean Reuter, and it details exactly what happened to Kammler. And it's pretty shocking when you think about it, that this guy who knew all the Germans' technical secrets at the end of the Second World War, but who had a major hand in the Holocaust, was allowed to, quotes, get away with it. But he did.